Hi everyone, it's Becky here. I hope you're also enjoying your summer as well. So today I'm taking you all to Crescent Beach, which is located in the city of White Rock in the southern part of Greater Vancouver. Here we are approaching the little village of Crescent Beach, and there are a lot of little cafes, ice cream shops, and little restaurants nearby the beach. And yeah, the beach is quite busy today on a weekday, and I see trains passing through the forest there. That's so cool. So here I am sitting down on the beach, and here I've got my gooseneck phone mount attached to the edge of my big sketchbook, and I just did like a quick 3-minute pencil layout of the big shapes of the tip of the land, the shape of the beach. Now I'm ready to tackle the first big shape, which is the tip of the land containing mostly forest and bushes. This is the contour outline of the forest. On the lower part is the mostly wild grass and flowers, rocks, and some driftwoods. So I'm very rarely looking down at the paper and just using pure seeing to guide my hand, moving the pen, tracing out one thing after another. Yeah, and then a few more rocks in the middle ground. And I see a driftwood laying out this way in an organic cylinder shape. And I'm going to shade this side, which is kind of decaying, and then adding some rustic texture for the surface of the driftwood. Moving on to its nearby shapes, which are more rocks and wild grass in between. Yeah, so when drawing these wild grass, I just like to relax and yeah, just using these expressive strokes to show the life of nature, the wind blowing. It's actually a pretty windy day today. And then accentuate on the bottom of that driftwood, drawing some more rocks. Yeah, each rock has a unique shape. Now I'm drawing the contour outline of the distant mountain ranges, and then the bottom of the mountains. Now I'm starting to add more details, like those single shapes of trees and bushes for this edge of the land. Spending most of my time and energy looking at the actual view in front of me, using an almost blind contour drawing technique to get those foliage done. Now I'm drawing this group of people, and adding people to a landscape is always helpful to show that the trees and the mountains are way bigger than humans. And now I'm continuing to draw some more trees around the middle part of the edge of the land, suggesting the fluffy forms. Okay, I think that's pretty much all the details I want to add for the forest area. It doesn't have to be way too detailed. Now, I'm making this important slanting line, suggesting a strong sense of space for this beach. And this is parallel line, suggesting a little seawall blocking the turbulent high tide from crashing into inland area. So yeah, it's a pretty windy day today, but yeah, the air is super refreshing here by the sea. Now I want to draw one person here in the middle ground walking away from me, which is a back view, a man in shorts. And coloring the head area with solid brown, suggesting it is really a back view. And then adding some bumpy texture using these lively lines, rocks in the way, And now I'm drawing some more sections of sea walls to buffer the turbulent sea waves from crashing inland, because there are a lot of vacation houses and buildings right by the sea. Now I'm using these loose lines to suggest more bumps on the sandy beach, rocks and pebbles using dots to suggest sand kernels. This part is a foreground. So the foreground area, in my urban sketching and landscape sketching philosophy, it needs more details and textures, even for a seemingly flat beach. So in the foreground area, I'm sure we can notice these pebbles and the bumps very clearly. And here's a look of my finished line drawing. Now I'm ready to use my mini palette filled with Daniel Smith's brand watercolors to paint this lovely scenery. So I'm going to start painting the sky first. I just wetted the sky area with a little clear water. Now I'm just putting on the super diluted yellow ochre to suggest the tint of sunshine on the clouds. Now I'm using diluted manganese blue to paint around the horizon area, nice and soft. So it's actually a cloudy day and the sky blue is pretty soft. I'm also using these thinner brush strokes to suggest the gaps of sky in between the clouds. And I think I'm painting cirrus clouds here. So cirrus clouds are high altitude clouds typically found above 20,000 feet. And they're thin, they're wispy, and they're feathery, mostly composed of ice crystals. And yeah, they're always looking delicate. And that's very much it for the sky. I'm not going to overwork on it. My next move is to paint the first layer of the sandy beach using this slightly diluted yellow ochre. I also mix a little bit of burnt sienna into yellow ochre for more color variation. I'm also mixing a little bit of orange into yellow ochre for another interesting, warmer color definition. Now, I'm continuing to use yellow ochre, but a bit more diluted, as an underpainting for everything under the sky, including the forest. Now, I'm starting to paint the first layer of the forest area using the mix of spring green and yellow ochre. Every brush mark, it can be a different color definition of yellow-green, with different ratios of yellow ochre and spring green mixed together. I also mixed hooker's green with a little bit yellow ochre for the higher part of the forest, because I'm observing the higher part is a darker shade of green. And for the lower part of the forest, I see some shading tones as well. Shadows of trees landing on one another. Because it's so warm and windy, the paint actually dries pretty fast on this hot summer day. Now I'm ready to paint the second layer for the forest pretty soon. I just mixed burnt sienna with hooker's green, starting to shade the top area of the forest nice and bold. Now I'm secretly grabbing some cobalt blue and permanent violet to add on over here, because it's in the far distance foliage far away, could be looking maybe a little blue and violet in town. Now I'm painting the middle ground area of foliage by continuing to use yellow ochre mixed with hooker's green to start with, and then some pure hooker's green and even a little bit of cobalt blue and a little bit of burnt sienna mixed together to paint the bottom area of the foliage pile. Okay, so now moving on, I just cleaned my brush. Now I'm grabbing cobalt blue mostly, yeah, with a little bit of manganese blue mixed with it to paint the distant mountains. So the bottom half of the mountains are looking a little hazy because of aerial perspective. So I'm not loading my brush with too much blue and just keep diluting a bit towards the lower part of the mountains. Now I just mix a bit of spring green with manganese blue, dilute it to paint the little pools of seawater. And the next little step is to punch on this slightly muted yellow-green, which is yellow ochre mixed with spring green. And for the lower half of these piles of wild grass, I'm using pure hooker's green to shade, to suggest volume. And most of these rocks are white-gray, and I like to shade white and gray things with blue-violet. So now this is a mix of mostly cobalt blue with a little bit of imperial or royal purple. And I see the bottom 70% of most of these rocks are shaded. And just making the contrast a little higher by using a more concentrated, less watery version of blue-violet. Yeah, so the top edges of these rocks are looking shinier. And I also want to shade these driftwoods. Now I'm mixing burnt umber with a little bit of yellow ochre to shade around the bottom half. Starting with this driftwood here in the foreground. A higher ratio of burnt umber, less water for the bottom bit. And try not to overpaint. We can leave the top edges of most things paper white to give them a more dynamic look. And using the leftover blue violet to shade this rock here in the middle and a few more there in the far back. Now I want to intensify the contrast for the forest there, and here the previous layer is all dried, so it's easier to not letting this new layer to fade off. Wet on dry. So this is the mix of hooker's green with burnt sienna. It's much easier to intensify the shading tones when the previous layer is all dried. And I love doing more layers for painting foliage because they're usually very fluffy and full of weight. And shading tones, they really help to suggest the sense of volume and weight. Okay, so now I want to paint these sea walls using pretty much just pure burnt umber, starting with a pretty diluted version of burnt umber, because that's the lightest tone that I see. And then using a little bit of cobalt blue to shade the burnt umber. So the bottom edges of these sea walls are shaded. The top edges are brighter. And I'm continuing to use the shade of green, which is hooker's green mixed with a little bit of burnt sienna, to shade the bottom half of these bushes. Now, the sandy area of the beach also needs a sense of volume as well. Now, I'm using the mix of burnt sienna and a little bit of imperial purple. So the sandy beach is never 100% flat. The part going down gets less daylight. I'm also using imperial purple mixed with a bit of burnt sienna to suggest shadows on the beach. And here's the look of my finished 1 hour sketch, including the drawing and watercolors. Yeah, and it's fun to capture the essence, the liveliness of this place in pen and watercolor sketch. And yeah, it's time to go. And before I go home, I want to grab a cup of coffee and a snack. So in the far distance down there, below the mountains, is the buildings of Vancouver. So on the way back to the parking area, I want to stop by this beach. It's my first time here, and they have a pretty high rating on Google Maps. It's called the Crescent Coffee, and yeah, looks like it's pretty popular in there. Nice rustic interior and the mural there on the back wall. And wow, these apple pies are mouth-watering, and I think I will get a slice. So I got a cup of latte and a slice of apple pie with whipped cream. And I want to sketch the coffee and the pie on the bottom bit of the sketchbook page spread. So I'm going to start tracing out the contour outline of this slice of pie and the whipped cream here on top. This is the top of the pie slice, which is kind of like a triangle, the thickness of the slice, and all of these bits of apples, adding these soft lines to suggest the swirl of the whipped cream and the thickness of the dough, and drawing some more apple bits inside the filling, and drawing the fork here laying on the side, and the little plate, the brim, nice and gentle. Now, I'm drawing the opening of the coffee cup, the body, the handle, and the little saucer here. I love drawing circular things. The brim and the lovely latte art. So when drawing food and drinks, I usually finish it in 10 to 15 minutes before the food gets cold. So I don't sacrifice my food for sketches, and this is like a great challenge to have a time limit of 10 to 15 minutes. Drawing a banner to tie these two things together in a group. Now I'm ready to paint watercolors, grabbing my towel and water brushes. So I'm going to use my other mini travel palette, holding the same Daniel Smith watercolors. And okay, now I'm ready to wet these yellowish areas with clear water, and starting with diluted yellow ochre for the apple pie filling, blending a bit of orange. For the color of the coffee is the mix of yellow ochre, a little bit of orange, and a little bit of burnt sienna. And for the next layer of the apple pie is yellow ochre mixed with a bit of orange. Yeah, for this very appetizing color. Not too brown yet. And for the saucer, I simply use sky blue or manganese blue to echo with the landscape above, using leftover blue violet to paint the white plate holding the pie, using orange and burnt sienna mix for the apple, mixed with cinnamon and all the sugar, and then using pure burnt sienna to paint the overbaked area of the pie crust, using leftover blue violet to paint the shadows and the heavier shaded areas. Yeah, just be really loose and expressive using blue violet. And the blue and violet, they're beautiful contrasting colors with the warm tones of the apple pie and coffee. And using burnt sienna mixed with a little bit of burnt umber. So thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Here's a look of my finished channel for weekly updates or art journal, and I'll see you around in the next tutorial video very soon. Bye, everyone.